Hey, JD here with Paint and Custom Shop. Welcome to my channel, and I've got a special treat for you today. As followers of my channel know that I've never done an interview before, although I shoot a lot of videos of great musicians, but this will be my first. Hopefully, maybe it'll be the start of a whole new thing on the channel. I'm going to be interviewing. First, let me go back. My initial motivation for doing this interview with my friend Greg Douglas was to get him to do a tutorial on his song Jungle Love. But then, I realized Greg is full of stories. I've been playing with him for a couple of years, and one of the great things about our gigs is all the stories that he tells between the songs. And hopefully I can squeeze a couple of stories out of him before and as a bonus, we're actually going to do a tutorial on Jungle Love, which is a song him and Steve Miller wrote back in the 70s. So with that, Greg Douglas.
Here I am, and thank you, JD. This is really cool, man. Because JD has been responsible for a number of really well done videos that from our band, which is known as either the Pompatus of Love, or Greg Douglas and the Pompatus of Love, or Greg Douglas and the Sidewinders. Or
we've had a lot of different names, but it's always the same band and
same guys.
We rock.
Yeah.
And there's a few videos also on the channel that you can check out of that band, and you'll agree that we rock.
Well, before I go on, I gotta tell you guys, I've worked for years with Hector Toro, who was a great drummer.
Yes,
one of the best.
Solid.
Yeah, he's solid. And he's I don't mean this as an insult. He's kind of a meat and potatoes drummer. He's
the best kind of drummer. He doesn't get in the way.
No.
He just lays down the perfect groove for every song. So.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of drummers I work with where when they do a fill, you're holding your breath, just wondering, where they're going to land. Okay, he should be landing on the one.
I know that.
But you've played with him, haven't you? But with Hector,
his time is impeccable.
It is. And then you add you, and you're one of those bass players where you know exactly the right notes to play. I mean, you're capable of playing, an enormous amount of notes, but there's so many people whose styles got screwed up by Jack Bruce. As far as I'm concerned, he's responsible for overplaying bass.
Well, Jack Bruce and Jaco Pastorius and Stanley Clark and all of those bass gods that I'm a big fan of.
Well, I am too. But
you have to, when you're jamming when you're playing with a band. You can't do unless you're the star of the show, which I'm usually not.
Of course, Jaco Pastorius went out under his own name, and I actually met Jaco.
Yeah.
Here comes the first story. I was back in New York, and I was playing the Lone Star in New York City. It was a band called the Sounds of San Francisco, and it had, people that had all played with, various famous San Francisco bands. We had the bass player from Santana. We had the drummer from the Jefferson Starship, and a guy that I worked with a lot. He was just an astonishing guitar player who played with a group called the Quicksilver Messenger Service. His name was John Cipollina. So we're playing at the Lone Star, and this guy came in, and his face was beet red, which, it instantly led me to believe that he had long-term problems with alcohol. And I was warming up, and I was playing Little Wing backstage. And all of a sudden I looked up, and this guy was about 6 inches from my face. And he looked batshit crazy. And he said, "No, don't stop, keep on doing it, man." And So that's, if I stop, I think this guy's going to kill me. So finally,
that was Jaco.
This Jaco, yeah. The owner of the club came up and said, Jaco, maybe you should go downstairs. And our bass player says, no. This is Jaco. He's got to stay up here. He was pretty well gone mentally. I handed him my guitar. I said, hey, play something on here, man. And he just kind of played a bunch of nonsense. So
yeah, he was having a rough time around the time that he ended up getting to death.
Yeah, getting beat to death by a bouncer is not a good way to go.
No,
that's it's pretty sad especially for a guy like that. So I think you'll agree with me.
He needed help and wasn't able to get it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, you got to. Another thing that I do a lot is work with people in recovery. I don't do the 12-step thing. I have no issues with the 12-step thing, but I found something called smart recovery that worked better for me.
Well, the 12-step thing is based in
higher power.
Higher power.
Yeah, and
some of us don't believe there's a higher power.
No, I mean I think it's the miracle is that we are all here.
Right.
The fact, first of all, the fact that this planet exists is an anomaly in the universe.
Right.
There's a decent argument that there is no other planet in the vastness of the universe which cannot even be imagined. And I think that's why religion came about, because when I try to take it all in, it scares me. But SMART works off of the scientific principles. It's a rational emotive behavioral therapy. Sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent here, but for those of you out there who may have problems with alcohol and or drugs, this is a viable alternative, and basically works on taking responsibility for your own behaviors. That's
awesome.
Yeah, it really is.
I appreciate you bringing that whole thing up.
Yeah, SMART. Last thing I'll say about it is stands for self-management and recovery training. And I am a licensed facilitator, so I lead a meeting every week. Back to Jaco, he did not get the help he needed, and the world was robbed of an immense talent.
He was, and probably still is, the best bass player that ever lived.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of an undeniable fact.
Well, it's not.
I mean, there's other bass players that are good, that are great.
Sure, yeah.
There's tons of them, but he was like one of the first to just, he really made that instrument into something completely different than what it was before.
What it was, JD, is it wasn't so much his chops, which were undeniably great. It was his musical thinking.
Yeah.
And I kind of got this from an interview with Joni Mitchell, where she, who I think is also a musical genius.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And she said Jaco was the only bass player that ever got her on the bass that were just...
Those were some amazing recordings, the Joni Mitchell and Jaco recordings.
Yeah, incredible. And
a lot of people will say, "Oh, the bass was too busy" or "the bass was too loud." I'm like, from a bass player standpoint, that's what you want to hear.
Oh yeah, of course.
You want to hear that on every album.
Yeah, but Joni was the one who mixed it. She recognized what was going on there, and it was a grand piece of musical history, and I'm glad it happened. I tell you what, man, on stage, it's just it is such a trip to be able to go look at JD and just to see, because he can be very serious, and then all of a sudden you see this big shit-eating grin come over his face, and it's just like, yeah, now things are happening.
A lot of times, though, when you see me smiling, it's because someone made a mistake and I'm cracking up.
Oh, somebody dropped a reeker. There's so many names.
I don't really smile much. I'm one of those people on stage, you see, with the serious face. People say, "You don't smile." I'm like, No, I take my groove seriously. But
People used to say the same thing about me. I smile a little bit more now these days because I'm happy. Frankly, I'm happy I'm alive.
good place to be.
Yeah. Vertical's nice.
Yes.
These days, I work with another great bass player, James East.
Oh yeah.
And
that's Nathan's
brother. Yeah. And he subbed for Nathan with Eric.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow, that's quite a gig.
Yeah, no, James, you'd love James. Nice guy, man, and he's like you. He's a top of the food chain bass player. But he turned me on because I used to have a terrible time, and still do, with the fact my nose would run on stage. And my wife would say, "God, you played half the last song with this, stalactite on your nose." And I said, "What am I going to do?" And he explained it to me. It's the fact that your fingertips on your left hand are acupressure points that are directly connected to your sinuses.
Wow, I'm learning a lot of stuff here.
Yeah, it's. I thought about it, and it's especially on nights where I'm playing really well, and I'm really digging into the strings that it happens.
Wow.
So and he told me, he said, "Man, this happens to me every night." And I said, "Well, I'll know when you're happy playing with me."
Yes.
So anyway, I grew up in San Francisco, and I graduated from high school in 1967, and I was a pretty competent guitar player at that point. Had a cover band with matching suits, of course, and the band was called The Virtues, and we were real big in the Contra Costa County area, which was out in the East Bay. And then we all went to the Fillmore to see a group called the Yardbirds. And
I was a fan of them as a child.
Unbelievable.
They were.
So I went there. I'd never been to the Fillmore, and right before they came on, it was Country Joe and the Fish, and I became a huge fan of them, especially Barry Melton, their guitar player. But the Yardbirds came on and started with a song called "The Train Kept A Rolling," which you might have heard done by Aerosmith. But they were loud. They had attitude. They were so pale. They looked like they hadn't seen the sun ever. Yeah. And the guy playing rhythm guitar was a guy named Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
You might have heard of him. And he was the rhythm player, period. He was not about to try anything. He played one harmony with Jeff Beck on Over, Under, Sideways, Down, where they had that wonderful lick at the beginning. They did it in harmony. But Beck, during the first song, they had these awful little amps called Jordans. And they sounded pretty good, but they didn't hold up well. So one of his Jordans, he was playing through 4 or 6, I forget. But one of them went out, and he turned around, and he was like Bruce Lee. He was like a kickboxer. He kicked the top Jordan off the stack, and it went flying behind the stage and almost killed some poor roadie.
Wow.
And I turned to my girlfriend and I said, this guy's not only a great guitar player, but this is what I want to do when I grow up.
Yeah.
And so far that hasn't happened. And Jeff Beck, who just passed away, it was always the point where my compass went to musically.
The thing about Jeff is pretty much all guitar players say the same thing about him.
Yeah.
He's literally a guitar guy.
Yes. He does it all.
Yeah.
I was just fortunate enough to just sit in with a guy named Walter Trout. I'm amazed at how many people don't know who he is. He played with John Mayall for, I think, 12 years. and just an amazing guitarist. And he asked me to sit in with him, which was just a huge honor. But he agreed with me. He said, "Yeah, Jeff Beck is it."
Yeah, I mean it's universal among guitar players. He's their guy, and I was always a fan of Jeff. I mean, I had I was into the Yardbirds as a kid, like a 12-year-old kid. I used to play harmonica, and would blow blues licks and listen to the blues channels, and the Yardbirds would always pop up. And then when I became a teenager and started listening to all the fusion stuff, and Jeff Beck's Blow by Blow was one of the big.
I was just going to say
it was one of the big albums, and he just never quit until the very end.
No, I just saw him. And actually, this is so ironic. The tickets were willed to me by a friend of mine who died of cancer. But he could not have left me a nicer thing in his will than those 2 tickets to go see
Jeff. The thing about concerts these days is they're so expensive. I don't even go.
Oh, yeah. I see.
But back in the day, I used to go to concerts. I just can't afford them now. It's just
no. And he also willed me a steel guitar, which I have right over there. Beautiful instrument.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Matter of fact, let me grab it real quick here. Yeah, this is really nice, man. It sounds great. Anyway, nice.
Cool, man.
And he that was in his will too.
So it's not all steel. It's a wooden guitar with a steel resonator.
Yeah, it's got a resonator. Yep. But it still gets that nice
tone,
Delta blues sound.
Yeah, pretty neat.
So anyway, back to San Francisco, 1967. So we saw the Yardbirds, and it just kind of changed. It changed my direction. I said, okay, no more of this matching suits crap. No more doing Beatles covers and, Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter, all that crap.
One of the things I like about our band is that one time you made an announcement that you started the band because you didn't ever want to play I think it was Mustang Sally. Either that or Brown Eyed Girl.
Yeah,
one of the songs.
Either
and
one.
Somebody in the audience booed. I was like, that cracked me up.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to hear, obviously, people, drunks love to hear those songs.
Yeah.
But musicians hate them.
Well, for good reason. Because they're just...
Because, okay, I do a lot of gigs up in Old Town Temecula. You can be walking down the street. Every bar has a band.
Yeah.
You can be walking down the street. You'll hear Brown Eyed Girl at that bar. You'll walk down a little more. You'll hear Brown Eyed Girl again at this bar.
Yeah.
You walk down a little more. You hear it again at that bar. Because it's frustrating.
You just reminded me of something funny. I did a gig on Santa Catalina Island for the 4th of July. We opened up for the Spencer Davis group. And it was kind of a pickup band, so we did a whole bunch of 60s music. So I was walking up and down the street, and I passed by the same bar 6 times, probably, because the main street's pretty small. Every time I walked by, the band was playing Sweet Home Alabama.
It's another one.
2 hours. 2 hours. Every time I went by, they were playing the same damn song.
That way they don't have to learn many songs.
That's right. And I know somebody was dropping some serious coin in the tip jar. So anyway, back to San Francisco. I was a moderate guitar player. I mean, what do you call that? Like a mid-level guitar player. I'm not a beginner, and I'm not an expert yet. Anyway, I was still learning. And, I was still working on my scales and just kind of getting it all in my young, still as yet undrugged head. So we went out and I smoked my second joint with the band, and we decided we're going to go full on psychedelic. We're going to join the psychedelic movement and try to play places like the Avalon, which was second only to the Fillmore as far as booking great music. The first time we played there, we opened for a group called Flat and Scruggs, a bluegrass band. And if you've ever watched the Beverly Hillbillies, you've heard Flat and Scruggs.
Mm-hmm.
They did all the music, and they were incredible players.
They were outrageous.
Yeah. But so we changed the name of the band. We, of course, we were stoned, we're looking around. And somebody said, "Boy, the weather's so great here in the country." I said, "That's it, country weather." And we changed the name of the band and started wearing jeans and T-shirts on stage. And we got a manager that was an animal. The guy would go out, and he was so confrontational, and he loved the band so much that he kept us working for 5 years. He kept us working for 5 solid years. We got to a point where, I just was mentioning Flat and Scruggs. And that was a funny scene backstage, because you had all these hippies, and then you had Flat and Scruggs. And Lester Flat was looking around like he was in a leper colony. He was like,
like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, I went to shake his hand, and he went. And I said, okay. And Earl Scruggs, who was the banjo player and the best musician in the band. Actually, no, him and Josh Graves, who played dobro, were the stars. And he came over to him and he says, "Don't pay him no mind. Don't pay him no mind. He's stuck someplace back on his farm." He says, "I love you guys, man." And it was just like, wow, this is a whole new scene. And so I really started practicing. Anyway, this band got pretty well known. We were opening up for bands like 10 Years After with Alvin Lee. And Bill Graham, apparently, who was a big-time promoter in San Francisco, very, very well known. They made a movie called Fillmore, which you should really see. It shows what Bill Graham is all about. And he was apparently very fond of my guitar playing. He said something about it on the radio. So he would book me with people like Alvin Lee on guitar, and then I had to open for Jeff Beck, which meant that the way they had it was the opener went on, the second build person went on, which was a band called Spirit, and then Jeff Beck. Then I had to come on again after Jeff Beck had played.
After?
After he had played.
You can't play after Jeff Beck.
No, you can't play after Jeff Beck. I watched 3 songs, and I said, you know what? I need to go back in the dressing room and find the farthest away door and close it so I can't hear anything, because I'm going to have no ego left. Yeah, I met Jeff years later, but and he was very pleasant. He actually wanted to borrow one of my guitars, so I happily loaned it to him, but I said, there's a catch. I have to go watch you play it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was one of those rolling guitar synthesizers. I said, I'm not real happy with it, but if you like it, going on after Jeff was very difficult. I met a guy named Terry Dolan, who's a folk singer, and he somehow we formed a band called Terry and the Pirates, and we had this group of incredible musicians that would go through, they'd come into the band for a couple of gigs and leave. Anybody that was out of work knew they could get a gig with Terry and the Pirates. So the core of the band was myself and John Chipolina, who was once again if you look at a list of the top 100 guitar players ever, he will be on it because he was a great stylist. We became a pretty formidable duo, and we had guys like this guy Sid Page used to work with Dan Hicks and the Hot Licks. Astonishing violinist, just a great guy, and he played with the band. It was a fun time. Terry got a record deal with Warner Brothers Records, and I went into the studio, and I met the producer. There's this guy named Nicky Hopkins, who was a pianist who played pretty much with everybody. He played with The Who. He played with the Kinks. We played with Quicksilver for a while, but I think his best work was on the Beggar's Banquet album by the Rolling Stones. And he played on Sympathy for the Devil. And if you ever listen to the piano work on that, it's just perfect. It's amazing.
I'll listen to it with new ears.
Yeah, he's a was a great musician. But anyway, he was producing it, and I walked in, and there were all these high-powered session musicians, and I was kind of like this new kid. And I met Lonnie Turner, the bass player from Steve Miller's band. He was playing bass on all the tracks, and it kind of established me as being somebody that you hire because I did really well on the tracks. And it was funny because Nicky put out a solo album, and I heard some of my licks being played on it that he borrowed from the Terry Dolan sessions and made George Harrison play them.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, see, I made George Harrison what he did. So, anyway, I started...
So that was like early sampling, sort of.
Yeah, it was. It was... So I started to get a lot of session work, doing a lot of records, met some amazing players. This drummer I worked with a whole bunch named Bruce Gary, who... later on, when I was working with Steve Miller, he called me up and he said, "You're working a lot with Steve?" I said, "Well, we're on a little break, but I think we're going to go back pretty quick." He says, "Well, I'm forming a band called The Knack, and I was wondering if you'd be interested in playing guitar."
I remember The Knack.
Yeah, I know. And I said, "You know what? I can't do it, man, because I know Steve's going to go back." And so I had one more tour with Steve, and then he said, "That's it. I got to take a break." And I said, "Oh." And then, every time I'd get in my car, my Sharona would be playing, and I just, where did I put my guns? My career got a real bump when I was doing a lot of hanging out with a band called Soundhole. John Chiplin's brother Mario was playing bass, and basically it was what became Huey Lewis and the News.
Oh, okay.
So, Van Morrison saw them play at a local club and says, "I want you guys to back me up, but your guitar player sucks." So I went out with Van, and because I replaced this guitar player who he was a good player, but he wasn't good at Van's music. And the first night I was out on tour, I got a call in my room. I was sharing it with Bill Gibson, the drummer, and Bill said, "Yeah, he's here." And he handed me the phone. I said, "Who is it?" He says, "It's Van." And I covered up the phone. I said, "Am I fired already?" And it was Van. He said, "Hey, let's go out to dinner, man." And I'm like, "Wow, I'm going out to dinner with Van?" Because I was like the new guy. And he was absolutely charming. He was such a nice guy. He was funny. And I think part of it was I didn't show any fear. I didn't defer to him at all. I just treated him like another one of the guys. I toured with him for about 6 months, and he would come to my gigs and sit in. I'd be at some shithole bar down in San Francisco, and a band would walk in. And he says, hey, you want to do some blues? Yeah. So eventually I joined up with Hot Tuna, which was a band that was a spin-off.
Yeah, I remember that band.
Yeah. A great band, but it was the worst 9 months of my life and a lot of it was due to me because I was starting to drink a lot. Read it, and I'm doing an autobiography right now, and it took me a full year to get through that whole Hot Tuna.